So once again, Democrats and deranged leftists find themselves not only on the wrong side of a political issue, but the wrong side of history as they once again go out of their way to defend a pro-terrorist, pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic filth person. Just another day as a Democrat, I suppose. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the Tomi Lahren is Fearless YouTube page at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. It all starts right now. Oh, so once again, Democrats find themselves defending not only a non-American who doesn't deserve the privilege of calling himself a citizen, but somebody who has led the charge of disgusting anti-Semitism on multiple college campuses and helped inspire an anti-Semitic violent and grotesque movement in one of our great American cities. Mahmoud Khalil was detained by ICE under the direction of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He has no business being in our country. He may be a lawful permanent resident, but he is not an American citizen. And if he poses a risk and a foreign policy detriment, the United States has every right to turn him out on his ass. But why are Democrats once again bending like a pretzel to defend this kind of a person? Well, I want to bring in the perspective of my Democrat friend, Democrat strategist, who I hope can talk some sense into her party, Fox News contributor, Leslie Marshall. All right, Leslie, I'm very curious your position on this because it's not just the left that's defending Khalil. There are even some so-called conservative voices that are defending Khalil. And I think there are maybe some Jewish Democrat voices that are maybe happy that he is being detained and will go through the ICE removal process, hopefully. But I'm very curious your hybrid take on all of it.
Well, speaking of hybrid, what a good segue, and you didn't know I was going to say this. In addition to being a Democrat, I am a product of a Jewish parent and a Christian parent. I've lived in Israel, and I'm married to a Muslim, so I definitely have a hybrid of ideas on this. But coming from this point, it just comes down to the Constitution. You know, when I went to law school for 5 minutes, and one of the cases I'll never forget was when a Jewish lawyer represented pro-Hitler neo-Nazis in Schaumburg, Illinois, and he won for them because they had the constitutional right to hate and to march down a street where at the time we had one of the largest concentration of Holocaust survivors in the United States in that neighborhood and in that state. Shocking, but that's one of the things that makes our nation different than other nations. Is we have the freedom to speak out against our leaders, our president. We have the freedom to speak hate, even if you don't agree with it. There are many things people say. Look, there are a lot of people right now watching me that don't agree with me, and I hope they don't want me to be deported. Here are a few things. Bottom line. One, he is here legally, not illegally. Two, he has not been charged with a crime. Now, if he were charged with a crime, that could be a game changer, but there is no what is the crime and what he has been charged with. We do have a First Amendment. Green card holders have nearly 100% when it comes to constitutional rights that American-born citizens, and I'm an American-born citizen, like myself and others do. And also there's the hypocrisy that we see. You know, when people say you can't, if you're going to deport this person, well, how many people on January 6th were not born here and were green card holders and, not only spoke violence, but actually committed violence? And, the president was okay with that with his pardoning. There is no distinction, at least it seems, from this president and this administration between being pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel, and you can be both, but not pro-Hamas. I am not pro-Hamas. I believe they're a terrorist organization. I think that's very clear. And there are many people who believe as I do, regardless of their ideology. So that is the issue with this particular person and this particular case.
All right. Well, this particular person is not pro-Palestinian. This particular person is pro-Hamas. So there's
to think it or to say it is covered by the Constitution and is not breaking any laws. If he is funding them or receiving money from them, that could be a criminal act. He would be charged with a crime, and then he could be his green card could be revoked, and that status could be revoked. But that's not the case right now.
Leslie, this is the case with him because under the law, the Secretary of State is allowed to detain and remove him because he is a legal permanent resident, but he is not an American citizen.
And he has not been charged with a crime.
Well, but if our secretary,
and if having a difference of opinion.
Yeah, but it's not that though. Just the legal aspect of all of this, and then we'll talk about, the maybe the moral aspect and the free speech aspect, because I'm very curious your thoughts on all of it. But I will say I've spent the morning diving into this and listening to our legal experts, of course, on our shared channel, Fox News. And if the Secretary of State says that this lawful permanent resident poses a risk and a detriment to our foreign policy, our national security, he can be detained and he can have his visa and his privileges revoked and removed. So it is legal. And of course, we've got a judge that's blocking this, so that we're going to have, a waiting period to see. However, and again, I don't know the exact section, but I spent all morning listening to it. He can be removed if the Secretary of State says, hey, listen, he can be removed because he's not an American citizen. I agree that we have to defend even the speech that we hate. Even in some cases, hate speech is protected if you are an American citizen. This lovely gentleman is not an American citizen.
But that's not true. That's not true, Tomi. And it's not really a gray area. I think it's very black and white. When you look at constitutional law, what green card holders are entitled to specifically with regard to the First Amendment, and it's nearly 100% of what you and I as American-born citizens are entitled to within the Constitution. And that's very clear. When you speak about the Secretary of State, one of the reasons we have three branches of government, and even though she's technically supposed to be a part of the judicial branch, she has something called the Supreme Court that is above her and that trumps her. And that's how come, and no pun intended there, and that's how come right now we have a court holding that up, and that's what it's going to come down to. For me, it's the slippery slope that this sets a precedent for. If we start to revoke green cards or we start to deport people, well, we then deport American citizens who we don't agree with. We have seen this happen in dictatorships and in fascist regimes in the past historically.
But Leslie,
history can repeat itself, and I don't want it to here.
This is not an American citizen, and some would
argue this is a green card holder who is here lawfully.
However, he is not an American citizen. So there is a difference between being an American citizen. Leslie,
free speech is not extended only to American citizens. The Constitution is very clear.
But the power of the Secretary of State to remove somebody is extended to lawful permanent residents who are not United States citizens.
And the Supreme Court can prevent her from doing that.
We're going to have to wait and see the legality of all of it. And again, I do think it's a gray area, and there's going to be a lot of things in this administration that are going to fall within a gray area that I would, consider activist judges are going to try to trump the executive branch. And it's going to come down probably to the Supreme Court in a lot of instances. But I want to just talk about the messaging here. When the Senate Judiciary puts out a tweet saying, free Khalil, right? Now, when you're not standing up as Senate Democrats, you're not standing up for the free speech of American citizens. For example, I was personally censored by the Biden White House for my stance on COVID vaccines, right? And the Hunter Biden laptop and a series of other things. When you don't have the Senate Democrats tweeting out that American citizens, conservatives, should have free speech on our social media platforms and the like, it is rather weird to see them supporting somebody who is, quite frankly, anti-Jew, anti-American, pro-Hamas, has caused a lot of pain and hurt to a lot of Jewish students on these college campuses. Do you think that's the best look and the best stance to take?
Well, look, because I visited UCLA and some of these other campuses when these protests were going on, there's also a lot of anti-Muslim hate, anti-Palestinian hate, bomb and make a parking lot out of Gaza hate. And are we going to do that as well? And I would not support, either. We have the freedom in this country, sadly, to hate, but not sadly in the sense that it is a freedom, and a freedom that almost every other nation in the world doesn't have and sets us apart. So if I don't agree with somebody, there's a big difference between, and me, I'm not a huge censorship person at all. If you have somebody being censored versus deported, it's huge. It's not just the difference between a C and a D and one letter in the alphabet. It's huge. There's a huge difference between revoking somebody's legal standing within a nation who has come here legally and who could someday become a citizen, or taking, their passport. Again, it's the slippery slope that it could become if we do this with one person. Being married to a Muslim, I know what happened to my house, to my husband's office, to our voicemail the day after 9/11. And my husband is a reputable surgeon. He was born in the United States. His parents were both physicians. His mother delivered 3,200 babies in her lifetime as a gynecologist. And the hate toward the Muslim community, honestly, really hasn't stopped since 9/11. And things like this to me, give a green light to those that have been sitting down waiting for something like this to hate them again. And I say that because there is this attitude that everybody who is Muslim is pro-Palestinian, everybody who's pro-Palestinian is pro-Hamas, and neither is true.
I agree that there is no room for hating anybody based on their race, their religion, any of those things. Obviously, that's subhuman in my book. But when you see these protests,
see, we agree.
Of course, we agree on that. I mean, any decent person would. These protests that are going on in these college campuses, UCLA, when you have Jewish students not being allowed to go to their classes. I mean, I understand that there is anti-Muslim sentiment. Sure, there's anti-Christian sentiment. There's, you name it, there's anti-that. But the prevalent nature of the anti-Semitism on college campuses, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, has been unavoidable, unmistakable, undeniable. And what you're seeing in the streets, and
has it, wait a minute, but has it, or has it that what we see?
Well,
I say
it's hard to miss.
Media
Leslie,
across the board has covered the
anti-Muslim,
the anti-Semitism, but has not covered the anti-Muslim sentiment,
Leslie, people
or
are
the
not
Islamophobia anywhere near as much.
You're not seeing that in the streets, though, Leslie. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but you're not seeing people taking over the streets of New York City anti-Muslim. You're seeing anti-Jew. You're seeing them wave Hamas flags. You're seeing genocide to the Jews. You're seeing a global antifada.
And that is very offensive to me.
I mean, however, I would assume it would
I know that these people offending me have the First Amendment right to offend me, just like I have the First Amendment right to offend them.
But if they're not a citizen and they're causing great detriment to our country,
Again,
and I would
the
argue
Constitution
too,
and the First Amendment are clear. If they're committing a crime, which protesting and speaking hate is covered and is not a crime, then, look, if they're committing a crime, absolutely.
Well, Leslie,
and by the way, if they're committing a crime, not only if they're not an American, if they're committing a crime, should be arrested for that crime that they commit as well.
It's very hard to be arrested in New York City, as I'm sure you know. It's hard to be arrested in LA as well. So these actions of this Khalil and what he's done and the movement that he's led on these college campuses and these protests and the things, I mean, these protests have gotten violent. There have been teachers that have been harmed. This happened just a couple weeks ago.
And those are crimes. The Constitution is very clear.
Right.
It is a
but when the universities are not calling in NYPD, or NYPD is not arresting some of these individuals that if they were here in Nashville, Tennessee, would sure as hell be arrested.
Well, I saw a lot of people arrested here in Southern California, so I don't know what. Again, is it being covered? It's hard to be arrested in Southern California. There watching, Leslie. If it's not being covered, we don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to be arrested in LA, as I'm sure you well know.
Oh my God, that's not true. I see people arrested all the time when I'm driving. I see people put in cuffs constantly.
Yeah, well, they might just be in cuffs for the effect. It's more like jewelry because they're in and they're out. You know this. Passed Prop 36 because the only people in California were like, hey, enough of this crap. But we'll talk about California.
And I supported that. People always think that, when you're a liberal or when you're a conservative, because you've dealt with this as too, that, we all think with one mind. And that's not true. There are things within my party I agree with, and there are things I don't. I'm definitely, and I don't want to say, I guess I'll just say I lean more conservative or right of center when it comes to crime, and to other issues that I don't always agree with my party.
Well, I appreciate that. Let's get into some California stuff. I'm really curious your take on Gavin Newsom. He's launched another podcast. He wants to sit down with conservatives. I see right through this. He's trying to pivot to be more moderate. I consider you, Leslie, to be actually a moderate. I don't consider Gavin Newsom to be a moderate in any sense of the word, any way, shape, or form. I think he's a snake oil salesman who wants to run for president. The fires were a really bad look for him. His response to the fires were a really bad look. California in general is a bad look, being the governor of that state with the homeless crisis and the deficit and everything else. Not a good look. So I think he's really desperate to pivot and appear more moderate. So, of course, he sat down with Charlie Kirk and attempted to use Charlie Kirk as his tool with which to do that. He talked about men and women's sports and got a lot of backlash. I want to play the clip. I'm sure you've seen it, but let's play it and then discuss.
You right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, right. that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that.
Okay. So some liberals who are far to the left of you were outraged by what he said there, just acknowledging the unfairness. I wish I could give him credit for acknowledging the unfairness, but I think it's all an act to run for president. So I give him zero credit. But what's your take? What's your take on his more moderate pivots in the last week or two?
Well, I don't think that's a moderate pivot. I mean, he has never come out, with the opposite of that. Send me the clip because I haven't seen it. There are many people in my party, myself included, that agree with the governor on the fairness of it. What we didn't see in that clip is, and I'll be honest, I didn't watch the whole interview. I'm not a fan of Charlie Kirk. He called me a racist on national television. So my violin stays in the case. If he's being used as a tool, he let himself be used. And Gavin Newsom did it masterfully, in my opinion. Look, and not just in my party, but we've seen Republicans do that, Republicans that have shifted more from right to the middle, and Democrats have certainly done it. And by the way, as a Democratic strategist, I would say that's a smart thing to do. And I would say it's a smart thing to do in light of our losses politically. You have to, and I think it's a very smart thing to do, to sit down and speak to a younger audience and to sit down and speak to people, on the other side, because there are, even though we love to talk about how divided we are, and when you look at the fact that, we used to have, water fountains. I'm from Massachusetts. I almost said a bubbler, and people be like, what the heck is that? Water fountains, for, colored people or, white people, to me, we're much more divided then than we are now. But there are areas of overlap. And those areas of overlap, I believe, are where a party, Democrat or Republican, a candidate, Democrat or Republican, can really succeed. And we've seen that in areas that are more purple, whether it's for a liberal Democrat or a conservative Republican, and their success. So that's what Gavin Newsom, is doing. You may perceive it as snake oil. I perceive it as common sense and a smart thing to do if he does have a plan to run for president. I wouldn't deny that he has a plan. And if you think, and I'm a victim, I'm a victim of the fire. My house was less than 100 feet from the epicenter, Eaton Canyon. My home was destroyed, out of our home for months. And I would disagree. I mean, look, people want to criticize FEMA. I thought they were great. I thought they were a machine. People want to criticize the governor. Now, you want to go into criticism of our mayor? I'll get into that. But a criticism of our governor, no, he's been, when I called my bank and said, is there any way we could pause the mortgage, for 90 days? The bigger banks are doing it. You're not a bigger bank. The governor had requested that. The governor in FEMA's office had already contacted my bank before I even called them. And I'm not Leslie Marshall in my mortgage documents, so, I think it's a smart thing to do, and also to use social media. I mean, President Trump did that and did it very successfully, to, his benefit. But what I was going to say, if you think California is such a mess and Gavin Newsom has made such a mess of it, then you should be happy he's running for president, because you would think that he would lose, single-handedly, and Republicans shouldn't even mention his name because he's not a threat at all.
I always think Gavin Newsom is a threat, and I'll tell you why. Because he is, in some instances, he's well-spoken. Not in that he really gets into the meat of any issue, but it sounds good. If you listen to him, there's not really any depth there, but it comes across much better than someone like a Kamala Harris, for example. But when you say, he's smart to pivot on this issue, or he's smart to take this, or maybe he already...
I don't think he's pivoted. Can you show me?
Well, he's the governor of California, which is one of the most pro-trans states. I would argue the most pro-trans state in the country. So if you believe it's deeply unfair, you as the governor and the leader of California, perhaps you should do something about it. We know California...
One of the things that he did in that interview, Tommy, and I think he's right to do, and you and I would agree on this, I think, is that is not a kitchen table issue. And one of the things that my party did, and there were many, I spoke out against defund the police. I'm like, what kind of a message is that? That's ridiculous. And also worrying about, pronouns, or worrying about trans in sports. That's not what people care about. When you look at the exit polling on both Democrats and Republicans, and when you look at where people are right now, people care about the price of gas. People care about the price of eggs. People are afraid of a recession. People care about their jobs. People care that their 401ks, their IRAs, their kids' education funds, I care too, are sinking. People are worried they won't get Social Security, or that their mother or grandmother and grandparents will lose their Social Security. People are worried about losing Medicare, losing Medicaid. People are worried about hardship. And for most people, the overwhelming majority of people in this country do not have a child who is trans in sports competing, and therefore it does not affect them. And so for him to say, look, I agree with you when he said he agreed with Charlie Kirk on the fairness of that issue. I think he's also smart not to put that issue front and center, not only as the governor of California, but as somebody who is planning most likely to run for president in the future, because that's not what the American people care about. And if this last election showed anything, it truly shows that they care about the economy, they care about immigration, they care about crime. And my party missed the boat on talking about those issues.
I don't disagree with you that those were the primary issues, but I do think that this issue of trans in sports, the pronouns, the woke, I do think it played a role in the election. Parental rights, I think, played a role in the election as well. They might not be showing up in exit polling, but I think that the public heart and mind and sentiment when it comes to men and women's sports, this isn't going away anytime soon. And the Democrat Party has decided they want to die on that hill. And you saw it with the backlash to Gavin Newsom just saying it's unfair. I think you're seeing that this is not going to be an issue that Democrats are going to let go of. They're not going to realize it's an 80-20, 90-10 issue, and they will hold on to it. So I think it's,
I disagree, because as a party, and I'm present for some of those meetings, on the phone, the Zoom, and in the rooms or whatever. No, I disagree, because we have an opportunity to flip the House and the Senate in 2 years, less than 2 years now. Working on the dissatisfaction of the American people right now on what is happening, and if it continues to happen and worsens, God forbid, in the next couple of years. Those are the issues. This is what that party is doing. They're in power. This is wrong. This is what we can do for you if we are put in power. And to me, that has to be where it is. And it's just not a top. I know it seems to matter, honestly, more for Republicans than Democrats. But it can't be an issue that Democrats harp on. And I would agree with you with that 80-90, percentage. And it shouldn't be. I mean, to me, if you want to lose again, talk about ABCD and don't talk about ABCD. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where they line up on that. I happen to think we're going to have a very successful Trump administration. I don't think that Democrats are going to win big in the midterms. And I think that the party really is in disarray. Who is the leader of the Democrat Party as it stands today?
Well, I don't think any party should have one leader. Okay. And, obviously we don't have the president. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is, one of the leaders in the Democratic Party.
Think he's doing a good job? Because he couldn't even keep his cats in line at the joint address last week. People were acting a fool, acting crazy, acting ridiculous. And Americans were unhappy with it on the left and the right, the way the Democrats behaved.
Americans on the left were really unhappy when Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert were screaming.
I don't disagree with you. I don't like the way that they act either, Leslie. I'm not, but I get it.
When Joe Wilson stood up to as a white man to the first black president of the United States,
has
called him a liar, and that's what started it. That's what started it.
But listen. Here's the deal. I don't disagree with you. I don't like when people make outbursts to get attention. I don't like it on the left. I don't like it on the right.
We agree on that.
I think it's ridiculous.
There should be decorum when a president. If you don't respect the person, respect the office.
Exactly. I was appalled, though, at the way Democrats behaved last week because the optics of it were horrible. I mean, not standing for the kid with cancer, that was pretty bad.
I agree with you, the standing. However, I think what's worse, I mean, that kid would be dead. Would be dead a few months down the road if we don't have cancer research. Come on now. That's common sense.
But Leslie,
whether you have a child or not.
It doesn't matter, though. That's not where they were seated.
As a poster child and then say, and we're going to rip away what helped to keep you alive, that very research and the funding for that research.
They were not staying seated because they were staying seated in protest of defunding cancer research. They were seated.
No, that is the reason. Although I didn't think it was.
Leslie,
I thought the optics were terrible. They should have stood for the child and made it clear where they stand on the defunding.
Why did they not stand for Laken Riley's mother and sister? Why did they not stand for Alexis Nungary?
How far are we going to go back where Republicans didn't stand when somebody said, like gas prices are down, Republicans didn't stand because it would make Joe Biden look good?
Leslie, but I'm not here to defend the entirety of the Republican Party. If we go back and you want to go back in history, I think for people that have gone through hardship, people that are just Americans, that it's a nonpartisan thing, that have lost somebody, that have suffered greatly, I think whether you're on the left or the right or your president's in office or it's not, I think that you stand and you acknowledge those individuals.
I do agree.
But the Democrats did not do that.
But I think it's worse to strip funding from anybody with cancer.
But I'm asking you, why would they not stand for Mark Fogel being returned, a prisoner of Russia and with his 90-something-year-old mother there? Why would they not stand for Laken
The
Riley's
same
family?
reason Republicans don't stand when Democrats have anything that tugs at the heartstrings, because everybody pulls out their people as props, sadly.
If you guys are the loving and tolerant left, why not stand for those things? I get it. And if we want to criticize Republicans that don't stand, I'll do that all day long.
But you have to remember, Tomi,
if
you can't win there, okay? If you don't stand, you're evil. If you do stand,
then
you're
what?
with Trump. Look at,
well,
if you
with
do
Trump,
stand,
no,
you're
you're
giving
with
Trump
Laken Riley.
more fodder.
No, if you stand, you're with Laken Riley. You're with DJ Daniel. You're with Jocelyn Nungare's mom. You're with Mark Fogel and his mother. You're with.
But that's not how it would be perceived. I mean, for example,
but how not? That would just be perceived as human.
Gavin Newsom said he didn't think it was fair. And what did you say? I don't believe him. It's snake oil. And that's exactly what would have happened if they stood up. Either way,
I don't think so.
It would have been perceived negatively.
For people. I didn't expect them to stand up when Donald Trump was talking about Doge or talking about border enforcement. I didn't expect them to stand for that because it's a policy difference. I always expect people to stand for people.
And I do as well, but I've seen it happen on both sides and I don't agree with it on either side.
All right. Well, at least we agree that we should just stand for humans that have gone through great trauma.
We do agree to that. We do agree to decorum and respecting the office of the presidency. Is that 3, girl? Did we agree to 3 today?
So let me add another one. Do you think that Jasmine Crockett is the best person to be communicating the policies, platforms, and agenda of the Democrat Party?
I don't think that any one person should.
Do you think she's doing a good job?
I don't always
agree. She's getting a lot of airtime, Leslie.
Well, I guess I should ask you, is Marjorie Taylor Greene good for your spokesperson for your party?
No, but she's not the spokesperson of my party. Donald Trump is,
Right. Well, Jasmine Crockett is not the spokesperson. I mean, she's very outspoken. Look, she speaks to a certain segment, not just of the population. She represents her constituents. I am not one of her constituents. I think there's a lot of good with what she does, but I do. Look, I'm going to just say it out there. I'm going to sound, my kids call me a boomer lately, right? I'm going to sound like a boomer right now. I really want decorum. I don't want swearing on either side. It's really hard for me to tell my teens not to swear when our leaders are swearing at each other and on national television and everybody's like, okay, what the heck, right? 1, 2, the name calling. Please grow up. Both sides, grow up. Stop calling people names. That's not what either side voted for. And honestly, what our government, if you just read, when people speak about our founding forefathers, shame on Speaker Johnson, he needs to reread what our founding forefathers wanted. They wanted people from different sides to speak together, to work together for the common good. And we're just not seeing that anymore. And honestly, we're not seeing that left or right. So what's going to happen is every great empire has fallen, and the United States will either get its crap together before we fall or learn from its mistakes after we fall. And that's where we're at. And that's sad. They could, if they cared more about their constituents and this nation than clicks on Twitter, appearances on television, and approval ratings, and not be afraid of somebody primarying them, I think we get a lot more accomplished.
Well, I don't disagree with you, and I've long called out Republicans that I think are attention seekers that seek to only get attention and clicks and notoriety. There are several on my side, and I don't disagree there. The last thing I want to talk to you about, because we're in this culture conversation, the Black Lives Matter is being removed from the DC Plaza. We have some video of them taking that out. I think it was very divisive. I think that BLM is a sham organization. They have a lot of beautiful mansions with the Southern California real estate. I'm sure maybe you've seen them on some of your tours around the city. But I think that this is a positive step. I don't think we should be painting Black Lives Matter. I think a lot of people suffered because of what BLM did in the Summer of Love 2020, looting and burning businesses and causing great racial division in the aftermath of George Floyd. So I think this is a good step. But I'm wondering how you see it.
I don't see it as a good step because, especially if you speak to those in the African-American community where Republicans had been making some inroads politically, and they're going to lose those. They're going to lose those, although it was temporary. With
something on the street? Leslie, removing a mural?
You asked me my opinion. I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
First of all, when you start to remove African-American history or any accolades for those in the African-American community. And we're seeing that done in our federal government and by this, whatever this is called, Doge faction of our government. Second, if you say we're there to cut the fat and to reduce spending, How much did it cost to remove that?
How
And
much
where
did
could
it
that
cost
money
to
have
paint
been?
it?
Where could that money have been better spent? So to be honest, again, I just don't think it's a priority. I know some people on the left are all upset, and I see people on the right are cheerleading it. I just don't consider it a huge issue. The mural on the street in Washington, D.C.,
So I
and
have
the
a question
cost
for you.
to take it away.
If there was a mural painted on the DC Plaza that said MAGA, I have a feeling that your party, once in power, would probably want it removed.
I will bet money it will be there before the 4 years is over.
You think they're going to paint MAGA on the street?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think so.
I
But
think so.
I imagine your party would
With my
probably
tax
want
dollars.
that removed. Yeah, well, your tax dollars are going to a lot of things, especially in California, like illegal immigrant
Well, my
healthcare,
tax
but-
dollars aren't going to cancer research, which is really awful. I don't have cancer, but my mom does. My mom has leukemia, and I really, I want money spent on research, on medical research. It's a game changer.
I want money spent on medical research
is the
too.
difference between life and death, and the difference between sometimes somebody living to 50 versus 80.
What about transgender surgeries on mice?
There is no transgender surgery
no,
on mice,
no.
girl. You're more
There
intelligent
are.
than that.
There
No,
are.
there's no
And Leslie,
transgender
and here's the
surgery
deal.
on mice.
CNN tried to dispute that from President Trump's address, and they had to issue a correction because, in fact, there was money spent
Look,
researching surgeries on
I've always
mice.
said, even when it was years ago, $700 toilet seats at 14,000 could pigeons live on Mars, and those, by the way, were Republican policies, not Democrat. I have always said, cut the fat. I don't believe that medical research is fat. I don't believe that Social Security is fat. I don't believe that having mental health for those that are considering suicide within our veterans population in the United States is fat. I don't believe services for our veterans is fat. Yes, there's fat, and there's a lot of fat that has to be cut. But I don't agree with the cuts that they are making. And from the anger, and whether you see, in the polls or at town halls, which no, they're not. If they're being funded by Soros, then he wrote a hell of a check for Bernie Sanders lately. And I mean, in that crowd that came out, I agree with cutting the fat. I don't agree with what this group of kids is calling fat.
Okay. Well, we disagree. Also, at that Bernie Sanders rally, I believe that he had a trans musician who was singing about inappropriate body parts of God and some really disgusting things. So maybe that's
I
what
missed
got
that one.
Well, you know what? I wish I had it for you. I'll have to send it to you. If that's
if we're going to bring in God, I love as a former Christian to get to debate Christians on the Bible that I know in and out, back and forth.
Well, listen, you got to educate the people that Bernie's bringing to his rallies. I don't know if that's how he gets the crowds to show out, but it was pretty abhorrent, some of the things.
Well,
that
I would say let's educate the Republicans who dropped to their knee after pulling cancer research from children. That to me was horrific.
Okay. Well, Leslie, we agreed on a lot today. We disagreed on some things. I don't like trans surgeries on mice or minors. And so at least we agree on that.
I'm not laughing at children. So anybody tuning in right now that thinks I'm laughing, I'm laughing about the mice. You know what, though? There are a lot of surgeries that are done on mice and other animals that won't be happening because we've cut so much funding for medical research.
Well, listen, I'm happy about that.
Like cancer.
I don't like animal testing. So there I am on that. Leslie, I always
You know what? I'm actually, here's something. I'm torn with you. Do we have time for me to tell you a quick story or no?
Sure. You go ahead.
Okay. You can cut it if not, right?
We're live, Leslie. This is live to air.
No, that's right. We can't cut it. It's not taped. Hi. Okay. My husband is an orthopedic surgeon. I know people take drinks every time I say that. But when he was in his fellowship, and we weren't married yet, and I was visiting him for the weekend. We were living, in different states. You've done that, commute relationship for a bit. And I was going to visit him, and he said, you'll want to come with me because I love animals. And they had these goats. So I'm playing with the goats and everything. So the next time I visited him, I said, hey, can we go by with the goats? And he's like, no more goats. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm not going to tell you. I said, no, you have to tell me what happened. And he said, well, they basically break the knees of the goats and do experimental things, and the goats don't survive. And I called my husband a goat killer for ages because, he was part of that. But because of that, We now have, which my husband specializes in, repairing meniscus injuries instead of just ripping out your meniscus, which can be a game changer with regard to arthritis, walking, being in a wheelchair, and your mobility and your longevity.
Well, I'm hopeful that AI can do that work now because I love the goats and I don't want them transing mice or breaking goat knees. That actually is a really sad thing to leave us with, Leslie. But I appreciate the lively anecdote at the end to just lift our spirits.
No, I'm just saying that I love animals and I don't like, the research, on animals, eyeliner on bunnies and things like that. But for some things, we do benefit as humans.
I don't know about that. AI, let's just hope. I really appreciate you, Leslie, as always. We have a lot of disagreements, but some areas of agreement, as always. So I appreciate you, and I look forward to being across from you on Fox News one of these days very soon.
Yep, on the couch, right?
I love
All
it.
right.
Thanks,
Love
Leslie.
you,
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right, folks. The Tate Brothers are back in the United States and in the spotlight, but why the hell are some conservatives wrapping their arms around them? I have some final thoughts you'll maybe want to hear. So the Tate Brothers are back in the United States after a travel ban on them was lifted while they face charges of human trafficking and other offenses they have denied. Upon their arrival, Florida's Attorney General announced a criminal investigation into the pair, and Governor Ron DeSantis has signaled their presence in the Sunshine State is not welcome. So whether you believe the charges against them or not, whether you love free speech or overt masculinity or alternative media or whatever else you believe those two are selling, I do not know why you'd want to be associated with them just based on basic human decency. Their videos and their worldviews may just be for shock value and attention, but that probably makes it even worse. They are proudly sexist and misogynistic and, quite frankly, gross. And that's not me just saying that. They advertise it. So why the hell they'd be welcome to sit cage side for UFC 313 in Vegas last weekend is really beyond me. And why Dana White, someone who is now a face of the conservative and MAGA movement, would seemingly embrace them is also beyond me. Seriously, why? After all the conservative movement has done to take back masculinity, like true masculinity and manhood and fatherhood, this kind of embrace of those two who are truly the embodiment of toxic masculinity, that really sets the movement back. Yeah, they have a right to free speech, so great. Let them have their platform. But why the hell would conservatives give them ours? Like, why would we purposely cozy up to trash? I said the same thing about the bizarre and stupid conservative embrace of Kanye West. Someone throws on a MAGA hat or says something even halfway complimentary of Donald Trump, and we wrap our arms around literal trash because of it? No, I think that's gross. And for the record, masculinity isn't demeaning women for fun and attention and clicks. Masculinity isn't being promiscuous and boastful and douchey. Masculinity is being a good man, a good partner, a provider, a man of faith and godliness. Masculinity is treating people with respect and never starting a fight, but being willing to protect and defend when necessary. Masculinity isn't the Tate Brothers. I'd argue they are the opposite, actually. They're small-minded men with big egos, and they are tumors. So why would we allow the conservative movement built on faith and values to be their host body? Again, gross. But those are just my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in live tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. Catch full episodes of this show on Fox Nation whenever you like. Please do like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.